Many people are surprised to learn that the President of the United States is not actually elected by the people, but by a body of people who are called the Electoral College. So the question that always comes up then is, who is this Electoral College and what does it matter? And the second question is usually easy to answer because in most elections the Electoral College doesn't really make a difference. The person, the presidential candidate, who wins the majority of the popular vote, or at least more popular votes than any other candidate, generally wins the Electoral College vote and gets a majority in the Electoral College and becomes the president. But once in a while, actually 4 times in American history, it happened that the person who lost the popular vote won the Electoral College and became president. So let's take a look at how the Electoral College works and why these types of things can happen, that the loser becomes the president, basically. Okay, let's start with the Constitution, because Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution tells us how the Electoral College should be composed, in general outlines at least. So it says that each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature may direct a number of electors, and that's important now, equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. So each state has at least one representative, and if the state is larger than tiny, right now it's larger than about 700,000 people, the state has more representatives. So each representative corresponds to about 700,000 people in each state. Then every state has 2 senators, so taken together this gives us the number of Electoral College members for each state. Now, in addition, Article 2, Section 2 says that the state legislatures can decide how they select the electors. And originally it was simply the state legislatures who decided who should go to the Electoral College for each state. Nowadays that's done by popular vote, and most states actually use something called the winner-takes-all system. So whatever party wins the presidential election in that state gets all the Electoral College votes for that state. Only 2 states do it slightly differently, and that's Maine and Nebraska. And in Maine and Nebraska, basically the majority in each legislative district, in each House district, is basically selecting one of the Electoral College members, and then whichever party wins the state as a whole gets the 2 Electoral College members that correspond to the Senate seats. Now we have to keep in mind Article 2, Section 2 also says that the Electoral College members cannot be senators or representatives. So the number of representatives, etc., only accounts for the number of Electoral College members. It's not these actual representatives that end up in the Electoral College. Here is a map of the United States with the different Electoral College votes. And you see Virginia, for example, has 11 House members, so plus 2 senators, that's 13 Electoral College votes. If you go to states like Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, etc., these are very small states, so they only have 1 representative, and as a result they have 3 members of the Electoral College. Okay, now let's take a look at a ballot. I couldn't find a Virginia state ballot, but the Tennessee ballot is actually very interesting, because if you take a look, it explicitly says electors for Mitt Romney or electors for Barack Obama. And so it's very honest in terms of you're not voting for Romney or Obama, you're voting for the electors who have promised to vote for Obama or Romney. Now, as I said, those electors have promised to vote for Obama or Romney. They're not always forced to do so. Some states made it a law that the electors actually have to vote for who they pledged to vote, but that's pretty difficult to enforce. But as a whole, it's also the case that the electors themselves usually don't want to vote for anybody else. And I can show you why that's the case. So let's take a look at who actually the electors were, and who the electors who didn't win were, who lost the election, were in Virginia in 2012 in the last election. So here is the slate for the Romney-Ryan Republican ticket. So you see that for each district, the Republican Party in Virginia selected a person who would vote in the Electoral College for Romney and Ryan. And then there were 2 additional at-large Electoral College members for the Republican Party. Now, these people would vote only for Romney or Ryan if the Republicans won the election in Virginia, which they didn't in 2012. Okay, so you see a list of names, and generally you probably don't know any of them, even if you're quite knowledgeable about politics. They're not household names. I highlighted Jared Walczak from Harrisonburg because I'll tell you a bit more about him later on. Now here is the Democratic slate of electors for Virginia for the 2012 election. For each district there is a name, and then there are 2 at-large names that correspond to the 2 senators for the state. Now they're elected by local party committees for each of those districts. Same in the Republican Party. So those are just regular party workers, party activists, and I highlighted Ben Ragsdale from Richmond because I'm going to tell you a little bit about him in a second. But let's take a look first at the Harrisonburg potential member of the Republican electors, and that's Jared Walczak. And who is he? Well, Walczak is a graduate of Grove City College, and currently he is an aide, a staff member for the state senator Mark Obenchain, who is from Harrisonburg. So his title is legislative director. So he is a staff member, he works for the party, but obviously he is a Republican, he is involved in party politics, and as a result, basically the party committee for the 6th district decided to reward him for being listed as one of the possible electors. Now, unfortunately for him and for other Republicans in the state, the Romney-Ryan ticket did not win the election in 2012, so Walczak did not get to vote for the president. Now, here is an excerpt from the Facebook page of Ben Ragsdale, who was one of the electors who actually voted for Barack Obama in Virginia. He was listed for the 7th House District by the Democrats, sorry. He is a member of the Richmond City Democratic Committee. He is heavily involved in Democratic politics. He regularly writes kind of op-eds for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, commentary articles, and he has been in public relations. So again, he is somebody who has been active in Democratic Party politics, and for his service he was basically rewarded by being put up as one of the electors for the state of Virginia for the Democratic Party. Now, luckily for him, luckily for other Democrats in the state, the Obama Biden ticket won the election, and Ragsdale actually got to vote for Barack Obama. Let's take a quick look at the timeline of how this actually worked. So on November 6 in 2012 was election day. That's when in Virginia the Obama ticket got more votes than the Romney ticket. And then on December 17, a little more than a month after the election, the electors met in Richmond, in the state capital, and cast their vote for Romney or Obama. In Virginia it was all for Obama, right, because the Democrats won. And the same thing happened in other state capitals. So the Electoral College isn't really a group where everybody meets in one place. The electors meet in their respective state capitals and cast their votes. Actually, they cast a whole series of votes because they go to different people to make sure they're correctly counted. And those votes are then sealed, and one batch is sent to the President of the Senate, who is the Vice President. Another batch is sent to the state's, I think, Secretary of State, and to a variety of other officials, so that in different places the votes are stored, and if somebody says, hey, I think the votes have been tampered with, there's always another spot where one can double check if the votes were correctly counted. But usually that's not a big deal, it's not a problem because the outcome is so clear in the Electoral College. So, January 4 is when Congress actually counts the votes. So, as I said, the votes are sealed, sent to the President of the Senate, and the President of the Senate then presides over a joint session of Congress, the House and the Senate. They meet, they count the votes, and they say, okay, Obama has won the presidential election. That's official then. And then January 20th, Inauguration Day. One interesting but completely unimportant tidbit is that in 2013, Congress was supposed to count the votes on January 6th, but this was a Sunday, so Obama basically passed a regulation that said it can be done on January 4. So, because then it was on a Friday, on a workday. Alright, so this is the process. Now the interesting question about the Electoral College is whether it makes a difference, right? If the Electoral College just confirms how people voted in the country, then why should we have an Electoral College, or why should we worry about having an Electoral College? So, in fact, the Electoral College does distort the votes of the people in various ways. So let's take a look at the map again. The first way it distorts the popular vote is that some small states are amplified, basically. They get a stronger vote share in the Electoral College than their population has in the voting populace at large. Again, take a look at Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, etc. They have a very small population, but every state has guaranteed at least one seat in the House of Representatives, so they get 3 seats in the Electoral College. Think about that. The 21 smallest states have the same population size as the state of California, right? And you can do the math and you see that the smallest states are really overrepresented in the Electoral College. So that's one way in which the popular vote gets distorted. If you're a candidate and you can win the small states just barely, you get extra votes in the Electoral College. Now, the other way in which the Electoral College distorts the popular vote is through the winner-takes-all system. So even if you're a presidential candidate and you win a state by a tiny majority, or even a plurality, you just get a little bit more against your next contender in a 3-way contest, for example. With the winner-takes-all system, you get all of the electoral votes. Now take a look at that. Florida, 29 electoral votes in 2012. I think in 2000 it had something like 25 maybe. That's a pretty big state, and it's a pretty close state. So if your campaign can win this state with a tiny margin, you get a lot of extra votes. And that was one of the reasons why George W. Bush won the presidential election in 2000, even though he got fewer votes than Al Gore. Other states where the vote was really close and which had a lot of electoral votes were obviously Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio is another state like that. So these states are really worth paying attention during a presidential campaign. But even if I'm telling you that if you win a large state with a small margin, you get a lot of extra votes and you may win the Electoral College even though you lose the popular vote, even though I'm telling you this, I don't think you necessarily get the right feel for why this is correct. So let me give you a very simplified example of how this can work so that you really see it in action. Okay, so for this example I made up the country of Electonia. It's a 4-state country. It has a blue, a pink, a green and a purple state. And the states have different sizes. So each of those smiley faces represents 700,000 people, because that's right now how many people correspond to one member of the House of Representatives. So blue has 5 times 700,000 people, pink has 5 times 700,000 people, then green has 7 times 700,000 people, and purple, gee, I have to count this now, 6, 9, 11 times 700,000 people. Do I get this correct? I think so. Okay. So we have 1 large state, 2 fairly small states, 1 medium state. Now, the blue state has 7 electoral votes because it has 5 members of the House and 2 senators. The Purple state has 13 electoral votes, 11 House members plus 2 senators. By the same reasoning, green has 9 electoral votes and pink has 7 electoral votes. Okay, now what I did here was, you see the smiley faces that don't have any color, right? They're kind of blank inside. Those are people who don't vote. And the numbers, I don't know if they're really realistic, but those people could be foreigners who don't have the right to vote, they could be younger than 18 years of age, or they could be convicted felons who haven't regained the right to vote yet. Okay? Now, we have two parties here. There is a blue party and we have a red party. So you see that the blue party has the majority in the blue state, obviously, and in the green state. The red party has the majority of the popular vote, at least, in the purple state and in the pink state. Okay? So this is what the signs mean. Now let's take a look at how the popular vote works out compared to the Electoral College vote. So in the popular vote, we find that there are 12 blue smiley faces and 10 red smiley faces. We don't know how the blank ones would vote, and we don't care because they're non-voters, right? So in a popular vote contest, the blue candidate would win the election. Alright, but now let's think about the electoral vote, and let's say all of the states use the winner-takes-all system. So if you take a look at it, in the blue states, not surprisingly, the blue candidate gets 7 electoral votes. Winner take all, 7 electoral votes for that state. Remember, the electoral votes are based on voters and non-voters, just on the population size, not based on how many people actually vote. So, now you can think about it. In the purple state, the red candidate wins 13 electoral votes, right? Because winner takes all, and there are 5 times 700,000 red voters and only 4 times 700,000 blue voters. Same reasoning for the green and the red state. In the pink state, in the pink state, 7 electoral votes for the red candidate, and in the green state, 9 electoral votes for the blue candidate. Now you can do the math for the Electoral College, and what you'll find is that the red candidate will get 20 electoral votes and the blue candidate will get 16. Right? So what happens here is that the winner of the popular vote actually loses the Electoral College. You can stop the video now and stare at this for a while and play around with it. But that's how it works out in this example. Now you might say, well, this is a very simple example. The United States have 50 states, and actually DC also has 3 Electoral College votes. Can this happen in the United States in real life? And yes, it can. Actually, 4 times in history, the winner of the presidential election did not win the popular vote. The last time this happened was in 2000 with George W. Bush.